Here's a number that should be talked about far more than it is. The typical American who reaches 65 today has around $200,000 saved for retirement. That sounds like a cushion. Then you learn that retirement can last 25 years or more, and that Social Security, the government retirement check funded by payroll taxes, replaces only about 40% of what a middle earner used to make. Do the math, and for millions of people, the money runs out years before they do. So what actually happens then? Not in theory. In real life, month to month. That's what this is about. Running out of money in old age isn't some rare accident at the edge of retirement. For a lot of people, it's built into how the American system works, or rather, how it was rebuilt. 2 generations ago, plenty of workers retired on a pension, a guaranteed monthly check from an employer that lasted until you died. You didn't have to guess how long you'd live or how the stock market would behave. The company carried that risk. Then, starting in the 1980s, companies quietly walked away from pensions and handed workers something else. The 401k, a savings account you fund yourself out of your own paycheck, named after a line in the tax code. The idea sounded reasonable. Save a little from each check, let it grow, retire comfortable. It was also for the companies far cheaper, but it moved all the risk onto the individual. Now you had to save enough, invest it well, and the hard part, make it last an unknown number of years. Miss on any of those, and there's no company standing behind you. Meanwhile, Social Security was never meant to be your whole income. It was designed as a floor, a base to build on top of. For a growing share of retirees, though, that floor is now the entire house, and people are living longer than the system was ever built around, which means the same money has to stretch further than it used to. So let's put real numbers on it. Among households headed by someone 65 to 74, the median amount saved in retirement accounts is about $200,000. Median means the middle of the pack. Half have more, half have less, and a large share have almost nothing. More than a quarter of those households have no retirement savings at all. Now line that up against what it costs to live. A typical older household spends somewhere in the range of $50,000 to $60,000 a year. The average Social Security retirement check in 2026 is about $2,070 a month. That's roughly $25,000 a year. For one person living on that check alone, Social Security covers less than half of a normal year. So where's the rest supposed to come from? Savings. And that's where the arithmetic turns brutal. If you're pulling $20,000 or $30,000 a year out of a $200,000 account just to fill the gap, that account empties out in well under a decade. Faster if the market drops early or a health emergency hits. The standard rule of thumb is to withdraw only about 4% a year to make savings last a lifetime. 4% of $200,000 is $8,000. $8,000 a year does not close a $20,000 hole. And here's the part people miss. It gets more expensive with age, not less. Health costs climb, and then there's long-term care, meaning help with everyday living, whether at home or in a facility. Someone turning 65 today has close to a 70% chance of needing some of it. It is one of the largest expenses in later life. And here's the trap. Medicare, the federal health insurance for people 65 and up, does not cover long-term care beyond short, limited stays. So the single most expensive thing about growing old is the one thing your main insurance won't pay for. That's often the bill that drains whatever is left. And none of this is spread evenly. What a comfortable year costs in rural Ohio and what it costs in coastal California aren't remotely the same number. A retiree can be doing fine in one place and underwater a few hundred miles away. On top of that, a single health crisis can compress a decade of careful, planned spending into a year or two, and that's usually the moment the money doesn't just shrink, it vanishes. So the savings run dry. What catches you? Before any program does, most people just try to stretch what they've got. They keep working. A rising share of Americans are still on the job past 65, often part-time, often not because they want to be, but because the check alone doesn't cover the month. They downsize, selling the family home and moving somewhere cheaper, or renting, which frees up cash but hands over the home equity all at once. And more of them move in with their adult children, folding 2 households into one to split the rent, the groceries, and the care. These aren't failures of character. They're the quiet, practical moves millions of people make to bend the numbers when the savings won't. When even that isn't enough, what's left is a patchwork. a set of separate programs and private products, none of them designed to work together, each with its own rule book. The foundation is Social Security itself. Once it's your only income, it just keeps coming month after month for life, and it rises a little each year with inflation. It won't run out the way a savings account does. That's why, for millions of people, the plan when the money's gone is simply this: live on the check. Below that sits a second layer for people with almost nothing. There's supplemental security income, usually just called SSI, a separate federal program for those 65 or older or disabled with very little income and almost no assets. The most it pays in 2026 is $994 a month for one person, and most people get less than that because any other income you have gets subtracted from it. There's SNAP, the food assistance program, which for a low-income older person might add a couple $100s a month for groceries. And there's Medicaid, and here you have to slow down because Medicaid is not Medicare. Medicare is the health insurance nearly everyone 65 and up receives. Medicaid is a different program run jointly by the states and the federal government for people with low income and few assets. And Medicaid is the one that actually pays for long-term care, the nursing home, the home aid. It is the backstop Medicare refuses to be. Then there's the private side, which smells opportunity in a tapped-out retiree who still owns a home. The big one is the reverse mortgage, a loan that lets someone 62 or older borrow against the value of their house and pull out cash with no monthly payments, where the balance finally comes due when they move out, sell, or die. For someone who is house rich but cash poor, it can turn a paid-off home back into spending money. It also carries steep upfront fees and interest that compounds for years, quietly eating the equity that would have gone to the family. Entire companies are built around exactly this moment, when the savings are gone but the house is still standing. So who actually foots the bill once a retiree's own money is gone? Follow it in order. First, the retiree pays with whatever they have left. Before most of the deepest help kicks in, you generally have to be nearly broke to qualify for it. Programs like Medicaid and SSY put hard limits on what you're allowed to own. For Medicaid long-term care, in most states, you have to spend down nearly all your savings first, the retirement account, the extra car, sometimes the house in the end. A lifetime of saving gets converted into care until there is almost nothing left. Only then does the government step in. Second, the government pays, which really means today's taxpayers. Social Security and Medicaid are the two biggest catchers in the net, and both are funded by people currently working. When a retiree lands on Medicaid for a nursing home, the public is now covering a bill that can run well past $100,000 a year. But there's a third payer, and it's the one that never shows up in any budget: the family. When the money's gone and the programs don't stretch far enough, a son or daughter fills the gap with their time and with their own wallet. Family members provide the large majority of long-term care in this country, and they do it unpaid. Economists have tried to put a price on that work, and the value runs into the hundreds of billions of dollars a year. It just never gets counted because no invoice is ever sent. Somebody cuts their hours, turns down a promotion, or drives across the state every weekend. That is a real cost. It's simply paid in a currency the system doesn't bother to measure. And underneath all of that sit the costs almost nobody warns you about. Start with the asset limits. To qualify for SSI, a single person generally can't hold more than $2,000 in countable savings. That number was set back in the 1980s and has never been raised since. 40 years of inflation and it's still the same $2,000. So the safety net for the poorest older Americans is frozen in the past, and it quietly punishes anyone who managed to set a little aside. Then there's the paperwork. These programs are so tangled that enormous numbers of people who qualify never actually get the help. Only around a third of older adults who are eligible for food assistance are signed up for it. The rest don't know it exists, can't get through the application, or are too ashamed to ask. The benefit is real. It just doesn't reach them. There's the benefit cliff, where earning or saving a few dollars too much can knock you off an entire benefit worth far more, which traps people right at the bottom. There's the reverse mortgage fine print, where fees and compounding interest can hollow out a home's value faster than the owner ever expected. And there's plain food insecurity. Millions of older people skipping meals or splitting pills in half to make the month add up. These aren't dramatic, headline-grabbing costs. They're small, daily subtractions, a colder house, a skipped prescription, a doctor's visit put off, and they add up to a lower, harder standard of living that rarely shows up in any statistic. And then the cost lands on the next generation. Some of it is money, the inheritance spent down to zero, the house that ends up with the lender instead of the kids, but most of it never appears as a number at all. The phone calls, the worry, the weekends, the careers put on hold to care for a parent, the system left short. That's the hidden bill. And families keep paying it long after the savings are gone. So why is it built this way? A patchwork of last resorts instead of a real guarantee? Partly, it's a chain of old choices that simply stuck. Social Security was deliberately designed as a floor, not a full retirement, on the assumption that pensions and personal savings would handle the rest. Then the pensions vanished and the savings fell short, but the floor was never lifted to make up the difference. The safety net beneath it was built for the truly destitute, which is exactly why it forces you to become destitute before you can use it. Who benefits from leaving it like this? In the near term, it's cheaper for employers, who no longer carry pensions, and it holds down government spending today by pushing the cost onto families, who absorb it quietly and for free. The risk got shifted off the big institutions and onto individuals, one household at a time, and the pressure keeps building. The baby boom generation is deep into retirement, people are living longer, and there are fewer working-age adults paying in behind them. Social Security's own trustees project that without changes, the program's trust fund reserves run short in the early 2030s. At that point, the taxes still flowing in would cover only about 78 cents on every dollar of promised benefits. That doesn't mean the check disappears. It means the one piece of the system that actually works for a broke retiree is itself under strain, right as more people than ever prepare to lean on it alone. So how do retirees survive when the money runs out? The honest answer is that they don't so much survive it as get absorbed by a system designed to catch them only after they've already fallen all the way to the bottom. Social Security keeps the lights on for most. Below it, a thin layer of programs keeps the very poorest from total destitution, assuming they can find the paperwork. And behind all of it stands the family, paying in time and money for a shortfall that was decades in the making. Here's the thing worth taking away. Running out isn't a personal failure lurking at the margins of retirement. For millions of people, it's the expected outcome of a system that traded guaranteed pensions for do-it-yourself savings, set the public floor low, and quietly assumed a daughter would cover the difference. The money running out isn't the exception the system dreads. It's the ending the system was quietly built around. If breaking the numbers down like this was useful to you, it genuinely helps more people find the channel, and you can subscribe if you'd like to catch the next one. Thanks for watching.